This is the Team Objection podcast for October 8th, 2020, episode 456. Cosmic alignment of numbers or something. I don't know.
It's funny, that says I'm the hostess with the most kids, and there's no picture of the kids in the pictures that are shown.
Yeah, well, I did that on purpose so that you wouldn't have your kids exposed on social media if you didn't want them to be. Now, I know your wife is fairly active, but that's also in a circle where she's got only friends list.
Yeah, you want to dox your kids, too.
Yeah, I didn't want to make that decision for you.
Have you seen the Snapchat filter where you can make their faces anime faces? You could have done that.
Dave, there's a reason we said you're the host with the most kids and not the best father.
Dave,
you want to dox your own children.
Zero people would believe that you had anime children. You've never watched anime in your life, and don't even start about the one episode of Haikyuu.
I've watched 2 episodes of Haikyuu.
Yeah, see, that's...
At some point, we need to show him an episode that has actual volleyball in it to see if we can actually hook him and not do the ones in between.
So actually, so Dave brought up an idea, and I thought, no, that's not going to work. And I was like, well, I have a better segue. But now that I'm thinking about it, and because Dave wants to dox his own children, I thought, you know what? I'm actually going to expose Dave's idea. So I don't know if our listeners or watchers have the same thing, but like I get spammed with like 15 articles a day about like 5 characters that Naruto could beat and 5 that would beat him, or like what would be crazy in Breath of the Wild 3. And it's like people just writing bullshit fan fiction all the time. And Dave was like, I read one. It was, what if you can create your own character in Persona 6? And Chris and I were like, wow, that's interesting. Is there like a citation, or was there like an announcement, or was it like a developer? No, it's just some dude just wrote a thing. So the better segue was CD Projekt Red did Witcher 3, which is like renowned for one of the best pre-created characters in Mr. Geralt of Rivia. Their next project, Cyberpunk, you create your own character. So they've gone from one of the most iconic existing characters, he actually even existed before even the games were introduced, into this new world where it's more of a blank slate. And it kind of got us talking of like, what do we prefer? What are the pros and cons of both? What do we like to see more in RPGs? The games like Skyrim, where you're creating your own thing, and it is a blank slate that you can like self-insert into? Or do we like, having that established character and you're living through them and kind of role-playing through that? Or maybe like a bit of a blend. And I have an example of the blend, but we can get to that later.
I just like how he used this entire segment to just beat me to a bloody pulp and then inflate his ego to new levels.
Yeah, I was like, here's what Dave did stupid. Here's how I improved it, though.
Here's the intellectual response to Dave's moronic, awful take of just naivete of believing that
I'm on my A game today.
Real.
I used to get those articles a lot. I now ban them on my Google News feed.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, I saw one that was like, here's 5 whatever the hell the creatures are from Hunter x Hunter. Here's 5 creatures from this that Aang could beat from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And here's 5 he couldn't. And I'm like, what are we talking about? Why is this showing up as a headline? Like, I know I've been interested in similar topics around those things, but like, why is this? No, this is not journalism. Fuck off.
So yeah. I guess this is really my first experience with running into that for the Google headlines, because I basically, I was looking up something for Persona 5 because I'm playing Persona 5 Royal right now and playing through that. And I was like, oh, this article, I'll click on it and read it sometime later. I literally didn't look at it for 2 weeks. Happened to look at it today. I'm like, oh, that could be an interesting discussion just for the 3 of us to have. And Shaun had to shit all over it.
Well, yeah, because then you get like, what if in I don't know, the next Skyrim game, an alien impregnates your character? You're like, I don't know. What if?
Yeah.
Did the developer hint at that, or are you just saying stuff?
As the impartial third party, I just want to point out that it was Dave entertaining a wild hypothetical for once, and Shaun not being willing to go along with him on it, which is very much against type for what we've done the other 455 episodes.
But the funny thing is, I will go down the hypothetical eventually. If you want to ask me, what do you think about create your own character in Persona 6, I will give you my opinion. I just don't like the structure of these articles of like ideas for Persona 6. And you're like, oh, wow, I'm really excited.
What if Mario Kart becomes a first-person shooter? And you're like, what if Mario Kart becomes a first-person shooter?
Yeah, that's...
Sean's just like, I love the question, guys. I just hate how you asked it.
Yeah,
Right.
pretty much, actually.
And if it had been me who suggested it, which I wouldn't do because I know these articles better than that from experience, unfortunately, given my line of work, but if it had been me, he might have said something offhand about it and we would have moved on. He wouldn't have said nothing, but we wouldn't have spent 7 minutes
I
on
would have
it.
not dedicated the intro to it.
Yeah. So, self-insert protagonist.
Chris also would not have doxed his kids first thing either, though.
No.
So that's, that's another thing.
Because you notice I also cropped out Shaun's wife. I mean, I guess people wouldn't necessarily know. They don't know the original photo, but like, Maisie's not anywhere to be found either. Because I'm like, well, I don't want to make that decision for you guys, even if they're important people in your life.
But
like,
my ring is showing, so astute viewers will know.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm not wearing it right now. Well, in the intro, it was showing. Anyways, so
I think my style of gameplay, what I like doing is always more story based. So the limitations that come from story writing in a game make me tend to like having a character that you take control of, not creating your own. Because something like Fallout, you create your own character. You can be male or female. You can design them anyway. They still have a rail that they go down, basically, as far as the story goes. So I think it's kind of an illusion of choice almost with a lot of those games.
I think that's true to some extent. My simplified answer to this, although we can elaborate on it a lot more, is it depends on if I have a party or not. In the case of Skyrim, because I'm off on my own anyways, I don't really mind having like a self-insert character that I can customize because it's like, well, it's just me anyways, so I'm not going to have a ton of interactions with other people, at least not frequently. Like, yeah, I talk to people in town or whatever, but it's nice being able to kind of make it my own person and pretend I'm them. And Skyrim in particular is like the biggest example of that, where it's like, cool, I'm the one sneaking around and like shooting people with archery, not some other person that I'm embodying. If I have a JRPG in particular, it's all about the cast to me, especially if the plot is not very good, which happens quite frequently in JRPGs, where the characters and their interactions and personalities carry me through the game in a way that the story doesn't necessarily do it for me. The weird outlier in all this is Mass Effect, because you kind of have the best of both worlds in that.
no, you jumped to it too quick. That was my. Remember when I was like, we'll get to my example of like a
That was
hybrid.
all of our.
That is actually the
Sean.
perfect example of
It
like
was
you
all of our
are
examples.
sort of creating your own character, yes, but
Also not.
you're also kind of not, which I love about it. It's very unlike Knights of the Old Republic, where you can be like the staunchest, like Law and Order, or completely evil. Mass Effect, you're a good guy. You're either like Jack Bauer or you're like I don't know, Harvey Dent before he went crazy, where you're just like very like. There had to have been a better example of what I was going for than
Yeah,
than
Harvey
that,
Dent
but
before half of his face got burnt off.
yeah,
That's all.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah, got it.
and his
got
girlfriend died, and
it. And all that,
That whole thing. But you know what? That was one of the things about KOTOR that I didn't love. Now, I played light side in that, but it's interesting from a story perspective, the idea of like corrupting the people that are around you if you truly go evil in that game, particularly Bastilla, because she's also strongly attuned to the Force, so like it makes sense that you can turn people. I get it. It just feels awfully weird to have such divergent stories and then try and reconcile them in a way that makes sense, because they had to go so extreme that there wasn't any room for like nuanced storytelling. Like you said, it was either full-on good guy or absolute scum of the earth, and it's like I like the Shepard approach for that reason. You could dally in between sometimes.
well, and in hindsight, you almost wonder, would it have been better to have you choose a path at the beginning and then have more nuanced choices within, and which I think is what you're getting at, Chris. But like, go when you play like, I don't know how many people did this where they bounce between light side and dark side because they are so opposite. I cannot imagine it's a high amount of people. So when you get to a choice where you can like help an old lady with giving her purse back or brainwash her to jumping off a bridge, like who's going to be like, which do I do here?
This is a tough one.
You're going to make the choice based off of the path you decided to play that round.
Or
you're not going to choose.
It's just like our presidential election debate right now. It's like, which one do you want? I mean, there's no nuance in there at all.
The only exception to that has nothing to do with story, and I think the rare times when people deviate from that path is if the reward is worth it. Like if story-wise, if they're like, I don't really care about this one way or the other, but it's like, well, if I brainwash that grandma, I get her purse, and her purse has in it this legendary scarab that's worth like 10,000 money, then maybe you're like, all right, I'm a good guy, but just this once, this grandma's got to go. I need that money. Otherwise, I don't think anybody really jumps between.
You know what though? I think you're right, but that illustrates my point almost even more. Is like that breaks the immersion completely. It damages the story. If you're watching a movie and like Rey from like in Rise of Skywalker like does something abominably evil, if she pulls an Anakin and kills all the younglings, but because it just is one, everybody gets one, she gets a really valuable diamond. And like she can live out the rest of her life with that, and then she's gonna go back to the light side. You would never root for her again, obviously. And so the fact that you can do that in a video game, even if the reward is there, the option to do that damages the story overall.
It's in Red Dead Redemption 2, shooting up an entire town and then fixing it by going, "Howdy, ma'am."
Howdy, ma'am. Howdy, ma'am.
But I mean, it's also unfair for me to be critical of Koto for that, and I'm not even really being critical. I enjoyed that game quite a bit. It's just, that did come out way before Mass Effect, and as such, the light, dark, good, evil proposition became a lot more nuanced over time. So it's not like KOTOR sticks out like a sore thumb because of it. It's just, in retrospect, they were advanced at the time. That's what's kind of almost shocking at this point, is to be like, yeah, back then that was revolutionary, and now we've come to expect so much more from our games that looks like very dated in retrospect.
But I could go on and on about Mass Effect. I think it was such a trailblazer, but like Witcher 3, what I like about having the character already established is you can get away with Geralt is a monster hunter and he does it for money, and you can do it for like not so much money, or you can do it for like a lot of money and kind of like extort the people asking you, but like he has a profession and he's going to do it. So like you're locked into certain character traits that I appreciate. Gives you an excuse to role play. Whereas if it was just me, I have a tendency to either be like goody two shoes or like completely not, if that makes sense. So it's nice to have an excuse of like, no, Geralt is going to do this he has to live on his own. He's not just like, it's a gray world, and the ability to have a gray character, I appreciate.
Yeah.
I think that's the limitations of, I guess, the programming that we have right now, and maybe the development that we have right now. Because if you think about it, if you really want to go nuanced differences between evil and dark, you basically have to create 2 games. Maybe not 2 full games, but like a game and a half of like different complete. I think that's what the original Mass Effect kind of tried to do a little bit, and then had all these branching arcs and everything like that. And then at the end of 3, you had to bring it all back together because there was too many variables, basically. And so I think some of the ones that do the best are the ones, like you said, like Witcher 3, that have a path that you're going to go down one way or the other. It's just how you do it is the difference, how it works out.
There are also bad examples. Mass Effect is one of the pinnacle, even though the ending debacle sort of sullied it a little bit. It doesn't undo what that trilogy did for the other 98% of it. The bad examples include stuff like Infamous, a game that I enjoyed, but whose light/dark stuff effectively just changed your character's look and some of your powers, but had almost zero impact on the story. So it's like, if you weren't aware of another path of existence, you might not care so much, but you can kind of just tell, like, okay, this isn't really nuanced at all. This is unaffected by my choices. I just happen to be an evil character, but it's worked out the same way. Like, this character died, and it would have died the same if I was good, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah. That's a bad example.
And, like Walking Dead, the first season at least, it has this problem, but like it's okay. I like how it's become a topic more about choice than character building, but your choices effectively don't matter in Walking Dead season 1, except that they do in how it's telling the story. It's like ultimately your Lee goes down the same path more or less, but you really write the story. Is he a hard ass? Is it tough love, or like is he really compassionate towards Clementine? And that flavors the entire experience, and it can be very different than, even though it hits all the same beats still. It's that nuance that actually matters.
Yeah, and I would argue that's why that game is beloved, because it's sort of like deciding how you shape Clementine.
Yeah.
Like what influence you have on her, and then subsequently what she does in later games. When in the later games, they have more choices that are actually defined as this or this, which are interesting to a point until you start to see the fabric of reality behind them, where like there's a pivotal choice at the end of 2 that is quickly swept under the rug at the beginning of 3. Whichever character you end up siding with at the end of 2 is gone or dead in the first 10 minutes of 3. So very quickly you're like, okay, at the time this felt like it had tremendous consequence, and now it's like it never happened. So what was the whole point of building up to it? And the other bad example that's along those lines, anything by David Kane. Heavy Rain, Become Human, Detroit Become Human, etc. All of those, because then you can very quickly see behind the scenes of okay, this isn't real. This is clearly set up as a false dichotomy. Those hinder the experience more than they help, in my opinion.
It actually sucks too, because in the moment, the end of Walking Dead Season 2 and the end of Mass Effect 2, some of my best memories in gaming, because in that moment, you don't know how much you're going to be let down later. Yep. And it's so thrilling to be in that moment and making that choice. And then, it gets shattered later. But if I could go back to the feeling I had when I was playing it, oh, that was the best.
It's interesting because you just wish that you could stop there and just never have resolved it. Now, you wouldn't know that. Of course, if it had a good cliffhanger, you want to resolve it and will. But, in knowing what you know now, if you could just cut it off there, you'd be like, man, that whole franchise was really good. And now it's the first game was really good. And then,
It's really interesting. So I'm going to just derail us for a second. We can get back or not, whatever. So The 100 is the latest example of a show that flirted with getting canceled, never did, and I was so relieved. And it had probably one of the, from what I've read, I haven't even watched it, one of the all-time worst endings ever of anything. Terrible. And I was just thinking, this would have been better if it had just been canceled. I would revere it. It would go down. I would always have a soft spot in my heart for it. And then you think of all the shows that have done that, like Lost. I didn't mind the ending, but if it had ended at the end of season 4 or 5 and then never got a conclusion, I would have been devastated, but I would have always been left cherishing that time. And how often would it have been better if something like Mass Effect 2, what if it had just ended at the end of 2? What would the legacy be?
It would be a great legacy with I wish I could have seen how that finished, and gobs of fan fiction stating that this is how it finished.
It's so much fan fiction. Dave would be referencing it to start a show. It would be incredible. But I just thought that was interesting. I, for a long time, had a policy that I don't start a show unless I know that it has an ending or is very likely to get an ending. And after the 100, I'm maybe I revise that policy because so much of good stuff is out there, never got an ending, and maybe it's better for it.
I feel like the reason Firefly is so well revered is because it got cut off so quickly. It was this one magical thing, got cut off and never came back. And it was oh my God, this show is so magical. It had so much potential. And all they hold on to is the potential. It's either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain type of thing.
Effectively, they had one movie, but a movie's never going to really resolve everything that a show might have left as a loose end. So, and I also think back to the things that really did stick the landing. I know a lot of people were disappointed when Justified only had 6 seasons, but I think they stuck the landing really well.
So well.
And what if they had gone on longer? What if Breaking Bad had been well, this is a mega hit. I don't care what your guys' original vision was. We need to extend this. And then they're having to make up excuses for why Walter White's kicking the can down the road for another 15 episodes, as opposed to being one of the pinnacles of television.
And some people criticize the finale for being too safe. And I'm just again, I felt this way during the time. I feel this way even more now. You look at something like the 100 and you're I wish it had just played it safe. You had the whole run of the show to be really brave, take chances, and that's fine. Just wrap it up in a way that makes sense.
Yes.
Don't pull a Game of Thrones. Don't pull a 100. Just end it well. The finale Breaking Bad didn't take any chances, and that's fine.
And you can argue that if you look at that whole last 3 episodes as the finale, it still takes plenty of chances. That third to last episode is more devastating than a lot of TV show finales are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But, to your point, I think we've gotten so fixated on, we've seen so much different storytelling that it's hard to tell something that's unique and original. In the pursuit of doing that, sometimes it feels like we've lost creative vision because now it's okay, we have to do something that's not expected. Most of Star Wars 8 and 9, where they're expecting this. Well, we're going to do this instead. Well, now they didn't like that, so we're going to do this instead. Well, nobody liked that either. And it's because, you didn't have an original vision, and it showed because there was no through line that made it so it was okay, this is why we're here for the journey. And if the ending's safe, That's fine too. You know what? Steins Gate's another example of that, where people are like, well, it's kind of a happy ending. It's like, he's miserable for 40% or more of the show.
Yeah.
You want him to be miserable in perpetuity after it's over too? Like, what do you want?
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons I love the ending of The Good Place so much is because that show. I'm not saying anything about it.
No, but if you say it's good, then that's still a spoiler.
Shaun doesn't care about spoilers as much as most people. It's fine.
No, but I don't want to spoil The Good. I actually really like The Good Place.
Yeah, but you're going to watch the ending either way.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
You know it's ended, and they could have probably kept it going for a long time, and the quality likely would have decreased.
Yeah,
but they had their vision, and they ended it when they did.
I guess it's no surprise that a comedy ends on a high note, but...
I didn't say anything about how it ended.
And you know what? There's the alternative point of view, too, which is in this crowded TV landscape, there's also no guarantee that your show's even going to reach its finish.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're seeing more and more the Netflix model of get a show, boost the show for a couple seasons, cancel the show, and then leave all the fans scrambling. It just happened to Glow today.
Oh, wow.
As of recording. Which was
I kind of hate
well-regarded.
Netflix, actually.
So this is the same thought I've had, where I'm like, oh, cool, like Cobra Kai went from YouTube Red, which wasn't even a thing anymore, and got picked up by Netflix, and it's renewed for season 4. And I'm like, so is season 4 the last one? Because if we're following the Netflix trend, it's not going to be around for very long.
Yeah, no, I read a whole article about how they do their analytics, and it's basically if they create a strong base. And the retention of that base is solid, which is what all the networks did for years. That's not enough for Netflix anymore. They have to have not only retention, but bringing in an X amount of new viewers. And if it's not doing that, then they cancel. I cannot think this will be good for their longevity, but we'll see.
No, their whole business model is merely having to bring in perpetual growth. They have to bring in new subscribers all the time, which means you need new shows to capture the attention of people constantly. It doesn't matter if you have good long-running shows, because why do you care about a long-running show? You've already got them subscribed. They're not paying anything more to watch a different show.
When people start getting rid of their Netflix account because they're sick and tired, I'm not saying it probably isn't happening yet, but I'm going to reach a point where if all the shows that I like keep getting canceled, I was very close. I will tell you, when they canceled all the Netflix Marvel shows and really Daredevil, I was like, do I really need a Netflix account anymore? Honestly, I flirted with it. If they keep making me flirt with it, they're going to start losing people. If you lose me, that's a bad omen for the rest of your base.
It's a harbinger.
I am like the perfect representation of what you're going for right now until I hit 45. 46.
I actually, you're in that core demo. I actually think the pandemic was a stay of execution for Netflix. And I'm not saying that Netflix is close to being done. Like you said, but I do think we're heading in that direction. And I think because now everybody's stuck at home and consuming more media, we've allowed this to continue longer than we might have before we started to get fed up. That reckoning is still coming because this is a self-defeating business model. At a certain point, if you're dependent on new shows to generate hype and then you jettison all the old ones, and then your only comparison is having more and more new shows constantly, all you're going to do is keep taking away the focus from the new ones you just promoted 2 months ago.
Well, and there's going to be more people that get sick of 1 or 2 season shows that get the plug pulled constantly. And that's all they keep doing. On the good shows. I mean, Ozark was camp. I mean, they were told they have one last season to wrap things up. It's probably a good time for that show. I think it's 4 seasons. That's right around the sweet spot. Maybe a little early, but it's not bad. A lot of shows, they just get canceled outright. They're like, you're not even going to get a chance to finish your story. That's it.
Which, it does infuriate people over time.
Or they have to do it in a movie, or they have to do it in a severely truncated season. I mean, Parks and Rec kind of comes to mind, where I don't hate the last season or anything, but you can tell it was sort of rushed, and because the episode order was smaller, they had to just cram a bunch of stuff into what should have been spaced out more. Chuck had this happen multiple times throughout the series. It's really noticeable after the fact. During it was kind of tough to tell, but when you watch it back now, it's like, oh God. You can see everybody just churning of, how do we get this idea in? What's going to happen? Or do we have a next season? Nobody knows. Leave it on a cliffhanger. Not too much of a cliffhanger. Could be the series finale. We're not sure. So it's tough. And look, I mean, this is not new. Obviously, we saw this in the era of television before this. As you mentioned, this is not just a brand new concept. But it just feels like a lot of things today, it's just been accelerated to the point where it's untenable.
Yeah.
So
no, I agree. I'm sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
Oh, no. The question is, do you guys want to create your own character in Persona 6?
Yeah,
Well, no. To bring this full circle, the reason I think that whole side warrants debate is because a self-insert character is only as good as the imagination of the person using it. So, Dave, I'm curious what your thoughts are on them.
Well, really, like I
Nice.
said in the beginning, I just don't have any imagination, obviously, which is where you're going with that.
I know.
So, I like. I hate the idea of being presented with this. You get to pick. Here's what you get to choose, and you get to make him be who you want to be. And then the voice actors are like, yeah, this guy over here, like because they can't obviously say your name, type of thing. Always bothers me. And just overall, it's all this illusion of choice. I would rather just control a character at that point, like you do in Witcher 3, where it's like, okay, you have this little nuanced choice, but it's really like you're controlling a guy with a name whose name they say, and you're going through the story as written. I prefer it that way.
I think it's a tricky thing because so Neo 2 is just the first example I thought of like the game is good, the gameplay is excellent, the story is not that good, and the characters are not that good. And I was like, that's an example where I would have preferred an actual developed character. And then like I realized as I'm thinking that thought, that wouldn't have helped because like they didn't show the capability to create a compelling character at all. So whether I made it or whether they made it, it would have been bad. And I think that's kind of key. Like, if you could have created your own character in Witcher 3, I'm sure it still would have been a great experience because their writing is so good. And likewise, if Skyrim had a solidified character, you still would have hated the story, but you would have had the same amount of fun on all the side quests. So I'm wondering if it's actually more complicated than that, and the truth is if the writing and the world building is good, maybe that's all you need and the choice is sort of less relevant.
It's kind of made for you, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I mean, in a way. I mean, I'll never forget when my Commander Shepard was like talking about I forgot what I said, like I was referencing the purple slimy race, and he was like, it's because he's a big stupid jellyfish. I was like, that's not what I wanted at all.
Oh, no.
But it's very funny. Yeah, those are the things that make me pause.
And it's interesting because you can get away with this on both sides. You can have a character like an Arthur Morgan, who your decisions and the missions you choose to pursue have an impact on your personal feeling about the character when all is said and done. And we talked about that in the Red Dead 2 re-review, where it was like, you guys hadn't done certain things, I had missed certain things. So all of that added up to make a slightly different Arthur Morgan for each of us. And he was a pre-established character who had some specific beats and character thoughts and alignments. But you can also do that with a game like a Skyrim or whatever, a Fallout, where it's like, all right, well, I helped those cannibals, or I murdered those cannibals because they were cannibals. So all of this adds up. I think the most important thing is, unless it's done really well, you can't hit me over the head with choices. I don't really like the idea of this tense moment is happening, and here is column A and column B, sometimes represented by actually like different triggers or buttons on the screen. That's really tough to do right. We have a lot more misses than we do hits with that. And that, again, like everything on the show, it's nuance, it's gray area, it's middle ground, right? So if you do the decision making where it's subtle and it just helps me over time craft a vision of my character, whether it's a self-insert or not, then I think we're on the right track.
That's it. That's truly the best. Again, Witcher 3, I'm obsessed. If I get a tattoo, it's probably going to be a Witcher 3 tattoo if it ever happens. But like you can choose to be nice to Ciri or kind of like a kind of stern father figure. In the end of the day, you're still having the conversation. You're still going to the same destination, but you're shaping the character. You're not choosing to support Ciri or kill her. So I think that is the most important part.
One of my favorite ways of having a created character, and it's a bit of a cop-out, but is in sports games. Creating your own character in sports games, there is not the story almost, as we saw with the Spike Lee NBA 2K. You can make your character, and it's a joke, but playing through an NBA season or a sports season with your own created character is actually a ton of fun because you almost make your own narratives in there. You can create your own face. Like, you're able to take a picture of your face and insert it into the game. So it looks very similar to how you do in real life. And there's something so satisfying about that feeling like I'm in the game when I create my own character and put him in a game like that.
Yeah, literal self-insert.
Yeah, exactly.
Which has the uncanny thing going for it, where you're like, that's my face mostly, but it doesn't sound like me, and I'm also not in the NBA, so I don't really know. But I can pretend.
Yeah,
and you know what? to your point, like those are solid, and I can also even pretend with like so Chrono Trigger is one of my go-tos, right? We talk, that's my Witcher 3. Even my Chrono, even though there's no decision making in that game for the most part, my Chrono still had little nuances over the course of it where like I chose to do a certain thing a certain way, and then that stuck with me in a way that somebody else would be like, I didn't do that at all. Like I didn't do that side quest or whatever. So some of that is just up to the player and their own imagination. I mean, there's only so much you can do, but the more you can create a full, rich world with a backstory and interesting characters, that's like half the battle right there. Everything else can fill in after that. If your world's boring, who wants to be inserted into it? If your characters suck, who wants to interact with them?
Yeah. Well, and you could be like Lincoln and create like Abomination in every game. And, you know, he has pleasure in that. So good for him. I think it's, again, to this point, the Cyberpunk, I know there's three origin stories that you can choose from. And I'm already getting into like, I'm going to be in the corporate one because it sounds like you're an asshole to start. And that gives me a really good like starting place to then like improve and have like an actual character arc. So I'm like way into there. But again, that's more the world and the storytelling giving me that option. So it almost wouldn't matter if it was like a established character or one that I'm creating. But I think that's kind of the solution that we've stumbled upon here in our very extremely focused conversation.
Just write a good story and everything will fall into place.
Yeah, do the part in the lore, the background, the characters, and it kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah, because you're going to enjoy it if you make something that compels people to continue with it or insert their own imaginations into it and get involved and engaged with it. It doesn't matter how much choice they have; they're going to feel engaged.
Yeah. I can have zero choice and still love a game. So, gun to your heads, because we always talk about being in the middle ground and then force people to make decisions at the end anyways. I'll even go first. I usually end up in the last position, but you guys can think, since I sprung it on you. I would take a well-developed written character over a self-insert most of the time. A lot of the times, the self-inserts that I've enjoyed are, in my head, a reflection of the game they're in as much as they are the character themselves, because there's only so much you can do if you're having to leave it open-ended. So when I think to my like favorite game characters of all time, do I like Chrono, for example? Sure. Fine. But like, is that going to be somebody who sticks with me as like a Yuri Lowell from Tales of Vesperia would? No, not the same way, because that character had these distinct moments that made them who they were. So I would have to go that way, although it's still pretty close. Like I've played games on both sides that I enjoy, and I don't feel super strongly about it.
Give me a base character like a Geralt, but with tons of hair and clothing chances for modification. I'm set. That's what I want.
I think I agree with you, Shaun, for the most part. Is give me a well-written character, a character that's set for the most part in the path and then that they're going to walk. Give me a little bit of customization options, even though I very rarely take advantage of that. But a minor thing is give me a set name for the character, so I don't have to hear them try to dance around the voice actors not saying
Commander.
Yeah. And except when it comes to sports games, I want to customize that completely.
Did you talk to the commander? Commander of what?
Have you talked to Freak?
God, that's
FREQ?
so bad.
Short for frequency vibrations.
But that's what was nice. Like in Red Dead 2, when Arthur was struggling with his diagnosis, I gave him a huge beard. He was wearing ratty ass clothing, and then eventually, when I felt like, he's starting to come to terms with this, he's turning his life around. Got him clean shaven. Took him shopping. So like, give me choice in that kind of stuff. I don't need to create every aspect of them. I mean, in Cyberpunk, you're creating their genitals as well. I don't really need that. I just kind of need some options.
I do.
Can you imagine Dutch? If you would be able to pick Arthur's name, and Dutch would have been like, "Come on, man,
come on, partner."
Yep. They would have given him some stupid
cowboy
nickname.
Oh, it just would have been terrible if you would have called him partner or friend or buddy the entire game. Ugh.
You know what I gotta say? I was just giving a shit. Mass Effect, again, though, excelled in this because they gave you a standardized last name.
Yep. They gave Shepard, and that's what you call him. It makes sense. And it works male or female, too. So.
Yep.
We probably don't give that series enough credit for all the things it pioneered.
Yep, I agree.
We would have if it had stopped at Mass Effect 2.
I suppose, but again, no matter what the ending was, I mean, those games were still tremendously important to the industry. So.
I love them. And I don't even hate on Mass Effect 3 like most do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, well, that discussion is the end of our episode. In between episodes, you can find us at our website, objectionnetwork.com, or on youtube.com/objectionnetwork for new videos 7 days a week. We'll see you next time.